When my son passed away, I thought nothing could break me more than that. But I was wrong. 7 days after the funeral, I sat in the living room, folding Carlton's old sweaters with trembling hands. My tears fell silently onto the soft wool. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the clock and the muffled laughter of my grandchildren playing upstairs. The funeral flowers still stood in their vases, their sweetness heavy in the air, mixing with the faint trace of my son's cologne still clinging to his clothes. It was as if he had just stepped out of the room and would return at any moment. That was when Cleo, my daughter-in-law, walked in. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor as she stopped in the doorway. She wore designer jeans and a silk blouse that probably cost more than my entire month's pension. Her nails tapped impatiently against the frame as she said sharply, "Nathan, we need to talk." I looked up, expecting maybe a conversation about the children or about what to do with Carlton's things. But her tone was colder than I had ever heard. It wasn't the voice of sympathy she'd worn for appearances at the funeral. This was something else. "Of course, honey. What is it?" I asked, clutching Carlton's gray cardigan, the one he wore every Sunday morning when he read the paper. She didn't sit. She didn't even soften. Instead, she said, "I've been thinking about the house situation. With Carlton gone, things need to change. The kids and I need space to grieve properly. Honestly, having you here is just too much right now." Her words cut through me like a blade. "Too much?" I whispered. "You're always crying, always touching his things, always talking about him like he's still here. It's not healthy for the children to see their grandmother falling apart. They need stability, not constant reminders of what they've lost." I tried to breathe steadily, but my chest felt hollow. "Cleo, this is my home too. Carlton and I discussed this before he got sick. He wanted me here, to help with the kids, to be close to family." She gave a short, humorless laugh. "Carlton said a lot of things when he wasn't thinking clearly. The reality is, this house belongs to me now. And I need you to pack your things." The room tilted. I gripped the armchair, Carlton's favorite chair, the one she had always complained didn't match her decor. "Pack my things," I repeated, my voice breaking. She folded her arms, unflinching. "Don't be dramatic, Nathan. You're a grown woman. Carlton always said you were stronger than you acted. You'll figure something out." I thought of my savings, barely enough for a deposit on a small apartment. Certainly not enough to live near my grandchildren in this expensive suburb. My entire life was here, Carlton's grave, the children I helped raise, the home I had poured myself into. "What about Emma and James?" I asked desperately. "I pick them up from school every day. I help with homework, cook their dinner. I'm part of their lives." She shrugged. "I'll figure that out. Maybe it's time they learned more independence anyway. Carlton babied them too much. And so do you." The cruelty in her tone was unbearable. Those children were her own flesh and blood children who ran to me with scraped knees, who begged me to read them stories at night, who called me their best grandma. My heart ached for them more than it did for myself. "How long do I have?" I managed to ask. "By tomorrow evening," she said briskly. "I have people coming to look at redecorating Carlton's office. I don't want any awkwardness." Tomorrow. 24 hours to dismantle 5 years of memories. 5 years since Carlton had asked me to sell my little apartment and move in, so I could help with the children when Cleo returned to work. 5 years of cooking dinners, staying up with sick kids, running this household while she traveled or entertained. 5 years of being a grandmother who never missed a school play, who knew every favorite snack and bedtime story. And now I was no longer her responsibility. I swallowed the sob rising in my throat. "I'll pack tonight." As I rose, her voice stopped me once more. "Oh, and Nathan, don't make a scene with the children. They're already dealing with enough. The last thing they need is to see you having a breakdown." That night, I packed in silence. The same suitcases I had brought years ago sat open on the bed. I realized how little I owned. Most of the furniture, most of the comforts, had been hers. I had given away almost everything when I moved in. I carefully folded Carlton's gray cardigan into the suitcase, along with the framed photo of him holding Emma and James on Christmas morning. I left behind the television he had bought me, the chair he gifted me, the bookshelf of novels we had shared. When I zipped the last bag shut, I sat on the edge of the bed and whispered into the darkness, "Carlton, I hope I was enough." For 2 weeks, I lived in my car, my grief as heavy as the night air that pressed against the windows. I cried quietly, clutching Carlton's cardigan, while the world outside kept moving. It was during that time, when I thought I had lost everything, that my son's lawyer called with news that would change everything. But that is another part of the story. The hardest part wasn't packing my bags, it was writing the note for Emma and James. How do you explain to an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old that their grandmother is leaving without making their mother seem like the villain? How do you say goodbye when you don't know if you'll ever be able to come back? In the end, I kept it simple. Grandma Nain has to move to a new place, but I love you both so much. Be good for Mommy. Love and hugs always. I left the note taped to their bathroom mirror so they would find it in the morning. By the time they read it, I would already be gone. I couldn't face their questions or their tears. Cleo had been right about one thing: they had already lost their father. They didn't need to see their grandmother falling apart, too. When dawn broke over Carlton's suburban street, the street he had been so proud to call home, I stood in the driveway, my car packed with the little I had left. The trunk bulged with old suitcases, and the back seat was filled with a few groceries I had grabbed from the pantry: crackers, peanut butter, and bottles of water. I sat for a long time in the driver's seat, staring up at the house where my son had lived, where my grandchildren were sleeping peacefully inside. My chest ached with a grief so deep it felt endless. Cleo appeared at the window, a steaming mug of coffee in her hand. She watched me with the cool detachment of a stranger, as if I were no more significant than someone holding a garage sale across the street. Her eyes didn't hold pity, only calculation, making sure I left, making sure I didn't come back to disturb the fresh life she planned to build without me. With shaking hands, I put the car in reverse. And, just like that, I drove away from everything I had left. 2 weeks. That's how long I lasted living in my car before the shame began to crush me. I parked behind a 24-hour diner on the edge of town, far enough from Carlton's neighborhood that I wouldn't risk being seen, but close enough that I could still drive by the children's school sometimes, catching a glimpse of them on the playground during recess. Some might call it pathetic, but for me, those fleeting moments of seeing Emma's braids bouncing as she skipped rope, or James kicking a soccer ball across the field, were the only light in my dark days. The first few nights, I convinced myself this was temporary. I would find a solution. Maybe a cheap room for rent, or a tiny apartment I could afford. I put my name on waiting lists for 3 senior living communities, but the waits were months long, and the deposits were more than I could dream of paying. The apartments in my price range were in neighborhoods where I wouldn't feel safe walking to my car in the middle of the day, let alone living there alone at night. So I stayed in my car. My days became a careful dance of survival and dignity. At 6 a.m., when the diner opened, I slipped inside to wash my face in their bathroom and brush my teeth. I'd order a single cup of coffee and a piece of toast, the cheapest items on the menu, and stretch them for hours in a corner booth. I learned to make that coffee last 3 hours, sometimes 4, while I read yesterday's abandoned newspaper. The worst part wasn't the aching body from curling up on the car seat, or the fear of every strange noise in the night. It wasn't even the dread of security guards shining their flashlights near my car. The worst part was the invisibility. I had become a ghost. One day, I saw my old neighbor, Margaret, at the grocery store. We had shared Christmas cookies for years, had coffee together countless times. But when I tried to catch her eye, she looked right through me, as if I didn't exist. And maybe she didn't see me, not really. My clothes were wrinkled, my hair limp and unwashed, my face lined with exhaustion. I looked like what I was, homeless. There's a line between the housed and the unhoused, invisible but unyielding. Once you cross it, people stop seeing you. They drive past without a glance. You are no longer a person, just part of the background, part of the problem they'd rather ignore. One evening, when loneliness pressed too hard against my chest, I drove past Carlton's house, my old home, just hoping for a glimpse of Emma and James in the backyard. But what I saw instead made my stomach twist in rage and heartbreak. A large dumpster sat in the driveway, overflowing with furniture and belongings. I froze, gripping the steering wheel as I recognized them one by one. Carlton's desk, the one where he helped the children with their homework. His bookshelf, still stacked with novels we used to discuss over Sunday morning coffee. His recliner, where he'd fallen asleep countless times with the kids curled up against him, watching movies. And there, standing beside the dumpster, was Cleo. She wore sleek workout clothes, her phone pressed to her ear as she laughed at something on the line. With one hand, she gestured for the movers to keep going, to clear it all out. I watched as they carried out the small table Carlton had used in his final months, when climbing the stairs had become too painful. I remembered him sitting at that table, sorting through family photos, writing letters to the children for birthdays he knew he would never see. And then I watched them toss it into the dumpster. The crash echoed in my ears. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles whitened, tears blurring my vision. Every piece of him, every memory, was being thrown away as if it had no value. My heart screamed silently inside my chest. That was the moment I realized I had lost not only my son, but the home, the family, and the history we built together. And yet, I was still here. Somehow, I was still breathing. From half a block away, I had watched them throw away Carlton's memories. My hands shook so violently that I had to pull over into an empty parking lot and sit until the trembling passed. I couldn't comprehend it. How could Cleo so easily erase every trace of the man who had been her husband? How could she strip away the very things that tied Emma and James to their father's memory? That night, loneliness drove me to the library, where I checked Facebook on one of the old public computers. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. The first post on my feed was from Cleo. A glossy photo of what looked like an entirely redecorated living room, bright white walls, chrome fixtures, abstract art. A sterile space, nothing like the warm, cluttered, love-filled home where Carlton used to build blanket forts with the kids on rainy days. Her caption read, "Sometimes you have to clear out the old to make room for the new. Feeling grateful for fresh starts and new beginnings." The comments rolled in beneath it, dozens of them. "So proud of you, Cleo. You're so strong, such an inspiration. Carlton would be so proud of how well you're handling everything." I couldn't read anymore. My throat closed, and I slammed the browser shut. That night, huddled in my freezing car behind the diner, I broke down completely. Not the quiet tears I had managed before, but full, wrenching sobs that clawed their way out of my chest. I cried for Carlton, for the children I might never see again, for the home and the life I'd lost. But most of all, I cried because I was starting to believe what Cleo's actions had told me from the beginning, that I was disposable. 5 years of love, sacrifice, and service had meant nothing. I had been discarded like an old piece of furniture, useful once, but no longer needed. Exhausted, I fell asleep slumped against the cold car door, dreaming of Carlton as a boy. In the dream, he tugged at my apron, asking me to help him reach something on a high shelf. I was young again, strong again, needed again. I woke to the sharp buzz of my phone. A number I didn't recognize flashed on the cracked screen. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. Lately, unknown numbers only meant bad news, bills, collections, voices I couldn't afford to answer. But something urged me to swipe the screen. "Mrs. Peterson," a calm male voice asked. "This is Robert Chin, from Chin, Martinez and Associates. I was your son Carlton's attorney. I've been trying to reach you for several days. We need to discuss some urgent matters regarding Carlton's estate." My chest tightened. Estate. That word belonged to people with money, people with plans. Not me. Not Carlton. "Mr. Chin," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady though I sat unwashed and weary in the front seat of my car. "Cleo handles all of Carlton's affairs now." "I don't really." There was a pause on the other end. His tone shifted, careful, deliberate. "Mrs. Peterson, there are provisions in your son's will that concern you directly. Provisions Cleo is not aware of. It is very important we meet in person." Something in his tone made my pulse quicken. "Can you tell me what this is about?" "Not over the phone," he replied firmly. Could you come to my office this morning? 10 o'clock? We're in the Morrison Building on 5th Street. I glanced down at my wrinkled clothes, my hair matted from too many nights against a car window. My reflection in the rearview mirror was hollow-eyed, unfamiliar. Mr. Chin, I should warn you. I'm going through a difficult time right now. I might not look very presentable. His voice softened, but remained steady. Mrs. Peterson, please come as you are. This cannot wait. 3 hours later, I sat in the most elegant office I'd ever stepped foot in. Leather chairs, shelves lined with law books, a faint scent of polished wood and coffee. I felt out of place, clutching my worn purse in my lap like a lifeline. Robert Chin, a dignified man in his 50s, adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and offered me coffee. It was the first good cup I'd had in weeks, and I held it gratefully in both hands as if it might steady me. Mrs. Peterson, he began gently, before we proceed, I need to ask you something. Please be honest. What is your current living situation? The question caught me off guard. Heat rose to my cheeks. I'm between homes at the moment, I murmured. His brow furrowed with concern. Carlton mentioned there might be difficulties after his passing. Are you staying with friends? Family? The kindness in his voice nearly undid me. I stared into the dark coffee swirling in the cup. No, I whispered. I've been staying in my car. Mr. Chen's pen stilled against his notepad, but instead of judgment, his face reflected only compassion. I see. Then it is fortunate we're speaking today. Carlton anticipated this might happen. He opened a thick manila folder and carefully unfolded a document. Your son came to me about 8 months ago, shortly after his diagnosis. He was very specific about changes to his will, changes he insisted remain confidential until after his death. He adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and read aloud. To my beloved mother, Nain Peterson, who sacrificed so much for my happiness and well-being throughout my life, I leave the sum of $7 million to be held in trust and managed by Chin, Martinez and Associates, until such time as Mrs. Peterson can establish stable housing and financial security. The words seemed unreal, echoing in the room like something out of a dream. I stared at him, certain I had misheard. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? $7 million, Mrs. Peterson, he said with quiet clarity. Your son wanted to ensure you would never be left without security. He made absolutely certain of it. My heart pounded in my chest. 7 million. For me? After being discarded, humiliated, left with nothing, my son had remembered me. He had seen me. Tears blurred my vision as Mr. Chin continued gently. Your son was far more prepared and far more protective than anyone realized. She may react emotionally, Officer Martinez added, her voice steady but kind. I nodded, my fingers tightening around the folder that held the legal documents Carlton had prepared for this very moment. My son had known. He had seen through the lies, the cruelty, the polished mask Cleo wore in public. He had anticipated it all, and now, even in death, he was still protecting me and his children. The front door opened before we even reached it. Cleo stood there, her hair perfectly curled, her expression one of annoyance rather than surprise. What's going on? She demanded, her eyes darting from Mr. Chin to the officer, then to me. Why are you here? I told you not to come back. Her voice rang sharp in the quiet morning. But this time, I didn't flinch. Mrs. Peterson, Mr. Chin began, his tone professional and calm. We're here to deliver and enforce provisions of your late husband's will. Cleo's eyes narrowed. Provisions? I've already handled all of Carlton's affairs. Everything belongs to me now. Whatever you're doing here is a waste of time. Mr. Chin adjusted his glasses, his face unreadable. On the contrary, Mrs. Peterson. Carlton made very clear arrangements in the event that you attempted to separate his mother from her grandchildren. As of this morning, custody of Emma and James has been legally transferred to their grandmother, Mrs. Nain Peterson. She is also the primary beneficiary of a substantial trust established by your late husband. For the first time, Cleo faltered. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. That's not possible, she finally spat, her voice rising. Those children are mine. My house, my life. Carlton left everything to me. No, Mr. Chen said firmly, his voice like steel. Carlton left instructions. And those instructions are legally binding. Officer Martinez is here to ensure a peaceful transition. You are, of course, entitled to visitation rights, which will be determined through family court. But effective immediately, custody belongs to Mrs. Peterson. The words hit her like blows. I watched as the color drained from her face, then returned in a flush of anger. She turned her glare on me, eyes blazing. This is your doing, isn't it? Manipulating him, turning him against me while he was sick. Enough, Officer Martinez interrupted, her voice firm but calm. This is not the time or place for accusations. The children's welfare comes first. At that moment, I heard the sound that had haunted my dreams for weeks, the patter of small feet on the stairs. Emma and James appeared at the landing, their eyes wide, confusion written on their faces. Grandma? James's voice cracked, a mixture of hope and disbelief. You're here. Something inside me broke wide open. Yes, sweetheart, I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. I'm here. Emma came running first, barreling into my arms, sobbing into my new blouse as if she could never let go. James followed, slower, cautious, but when I opened my arms wider, he fell into them too. I held them both, rocking slightly, my tears falling freely into their hair. Over their heads, I saw Cleo, her jaw tight, her arms folded across her chest. She looked less like a grieving widow and more like someone watching her carefully planned world unravel. Mr. Chen cleared his throat softly. Mrs. Peterson, the children will need to pack their essentials. We'll arrange for a moving service to retrieve the rest later. Emma pulled back, looking up at me with tearful eyes. We're going with you, Grandma? For real? Yes, my loves, I said, brushing their cheeks with my thumbs. For real. You're coming with me. We're going to be okay. As the children hurried upstairs to gather their things, Cleo's mask slipped for just a moment. You think you've won, she hissed. But you won't be able to handle them. You'll see. You're too old. Too weak. I stood taller, my voice steady for the first time in weeks. Maybe I am old. Maybe I don't have everything figured out yet. But I have something you don't, Cleo. I have love for those children. And Carlton knew it. Her eyes burned into me, but she said nothing more. When Emma and James came back down, dragging small backpacks stuffed with clothes and toys, Officer Martinez led us to the car. Mr. Chen walked beside me, steady and calm. As we pulled away from the house, Emma squeezed my hand tightly in the back seat. Grandma, she whispered, are we really staying with you now? Forever? I turned to her and James, pulling them close. Forever, I said, my voice breaking with emotion. I promise you forever. That night, in the quiet of the hotel suite Carlton's lawyer had arranged for us, I watched the children sleep, one curled at the foot of the bed, the other nestled against my arm. For the first time since Carlton's funeral, peace settled in my heart. I wasn't disposable. I wasn't forgotten. I wasn't alone. Carlton had given me more than money. He had given me back my family. He had given me a future. And I vowed, with every ounce of strength left in me, that I would spend the rest of my days honoring his memory by loving and protecting his children, the way he had once trusted me to protect him. Cleo looked around the sterile living room as if seeing it for the first time. Her voice cracked, softer now, almost uncertain. Their things, their clothes are upstairs. Their toys, too. I haven't, she stopped, unable to finish. The social worker wrote something on her clipboard before looking at her kindly but firmly. We'll need to gather their essentials today. They can take the rest later. For now, we'll pack what they need most. I stood quietly, hands clasped together, my heart pounding. For weeks, I had been powerless. For weeks, Cleo's voice had been the one that silenced mine. But now, with the law behind me and Carlton's words echoing in my heart, I felt something rising inside me that had been gone for so long. Strength. Cleo sank into the pristine white sofa, staring at the floor as though the weight of it all was crushing her. You can't take them from me. They're all I have left, she whispered, though the words sounded more like a confession than a protest. No, I said gently but firmly. They're not all you have left. They're people, children, who need more than someone to claim them. They need someone to love them, to hold them through the nightmares, to tell them stories of their father so they don't forget who he was. They need someone who sees them, not just someone who owns them. Her eyes flicked up to me, red-rimmed but still defiant. And you think you're that person? I don't just think it, I replied, my voice steady. Carlton trusted me with his whole heart. He knew me. He knew them. And he knew you. Silence hung heavy between us. The social worker finally broke it. We'll arrange transportation to pick up Emma and James after school. Mrs. Nain Peterson, you'll be there with us. She turned to Cleo. You will, of course, be allowed contact. But effective immediately, custody is transferred. This is final. Cleo pressed her palms to her temples, rocking slightly. This isn't fair, she muttered again. But the fight had gone out of her voice. Mr. Chin closed his briefcase with a decisive snap. Fair or not, Mrs. Peterson, this is what your husband wanted. And the court will honor it. As the officials began their preparations, I found my gaze drawn to the staircase. I imagined Emma's little backpack with the unicorn keychain, James's toy cars scattered across the floor, their drawings pinned to the corkboard in the hall, remnants of a childhood that deserved to be preserved, not erased. I spoke softly, mostly to myself, but loud enough that the room heard. I'm not here to take them from you, Cleo. I'm here to save them for Carlton. For their father, who loved them enough to see past his own grief and make sure they'd always be safe. For the first time, Cleo's eyes filled with tears. She blinked rapidly, trying to hide them, but they fell anyway. She looked away, ashamed. When the meeting concluded and the officials rose to leave, I lingered by the doorway, glancing back at the house that had once been full of life and laughter. Now it felt hollow, stripped of warmth. But soon, Emma and James would leave it, too, and they would come with me. As we stepped outside, the sun broke through the clouds, casting light across the front lawn. It felt like a sign, a reminder that even in the darkest storms, the sun waits patiently to return. I tightened my grip on the folder of legal papers, my heart steady for the first time in weeks. Carlton's voice echoed in my memory. They need you, Mom. And I whispered into the morning air, I won't fail them, son. I promise. This is your new home, I said softly, as Emma and James stepped hesitantly into the apartment. The space wasn't grand, no marble counters, no gleaming chrome furniture, no expensive artwork on the walls. Instead, it smelled faintly of fresh paint and new carpet. There were soft couches, a sturdy kitchen table, beds with colorful quilts that the social worker had brought from a community donation center. A vase of daisies sat on the counter, a small touch from someone who understood how important it was for children to feel welcome. Emma dropped her backpack by the door and ran to the nearest bedroom, opening the closet and drawers as though searching for proof this place was really meant for her. James stood more cautiously in the hallway, his arms crossed over his chest, the look on his face a mixture of hope and suspicion. Go on, I encouraged him gently. That one down the hall is yours. You can set it up however you like. This is your space now. He walked slowly into the room, then sat on the bed and bounced once, testing the mattress. Finally, he looked up at me with something like relief. It doesn't smell like Mom's perfume, he said quietly. I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. No, sweetheart. It smells like a new start. Emma came running back, her eyes shining. Grandma, can we really put up Daddy's pictures here? All of them? Even the silly ones where he made funny faces. I bent down, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. Especially those. He'd want you to remember every part of him. The silly, the serious, the everything. She threw her arms around my neck, and for the first time since Carlton's funeral, I felt the weight of despair lift, replaced by something fierce and protective. These children weren't just my responsibility. They were my second chance at love, at family, at purpose. James cleared his throat, his voice almost too steady for a 10-year-old. What about our toys? Most of them are gone. His words cut through me. I thought of Cleo's dismissive tone when she'd said she'd donated them, erasing Carlton's presence from their lives piece by piece. I took James's hand. We'll get new toys. And books. And puzzles. But more than that, we'll make new memories. Do you remember the old blanket forts your dad used to build in the living room? Both children nodded at once, eyes brightening. We'll build new ones here. We'll make popcorn, tell stories, and laugh until bedtime. Just like before. Emma grinned. Can we do it tonight? Tonight, I promised. For a long moment, the three of us just stood there, the quiet of the apartment wrapping around us like a soft blanket. The grief was still there, how could it not be? But for the first time, it wasn't crushing. It was something we could carry together. That evening, after a simple dinner of pasta and salad, we spread out blankets and pillows in the living room. James carefully draped a sheet over the couch and chairs, creating a crooked but magical tent. Emma insisted on reading aloud from one of the storybooks the social worker had dropped off. I lay between them, listening to Emma stumble over the words, watching James pretend not to be interested even as he leaned closer to follow along. The room glowed with the soft light of a single lamp, and for the first time in weeks, I felt peace. When Emma finally fell asleep with her head on my shoulder and James nodded off with the book still open in his lap, I whispered a silent prayer of thanks. Carlton, I thought, closing my eyes. I'll keep my promise. They'll know your love through me. They'll grow up strong, safe, and cherished. And they'll never, ever feel invisible again. I tucked the blankets around the children, kissed the tops of their heads, and let myself cry quietly, not from despair this time, but from gratitude. The storm had passed. And for the first time, I believed the three of us could build a life together, one memory at a time. Emma was upstairs playing music while she arranged her rock collection, humming to herself in a way that filled the whole house with warmth. James was in the backyard, tossing his baseball against the wooden fence, shouting out imaginary plays as if the world were his ballpark. The sound of their laughter and chatter drifted in through the open windows. I leaned against the kitchen counter, a wooden spoon in my hand, stirring a pot of soup that smelled like comfort. 6 months earlier, I'd been living in my car, shivering at night and believing I'd lost everything. Now, the home around me was filled with the very life I thought I'd never get back, my son's legacy, my grandchildren's joy, my own purpose. The walls were no longer bare. They were covered in framed photos of Carlton, smiling on family vacations, holding newborn Emma, teaching James how to swing a bat. In the dining room, the children and I had created what we called Daddy's Wall, where they had helped choose every picture, every memory, and even written little notes on colorful paper, taped beneath the frames. Daddy told the best jokes. Daddy made pancakes shaped like hearts. Daddy hugged me when I had nightmares. At first, I hadn't been sure if the children were ready to look at those memories every day, but Emma had insisted. Mommy hid Daddy away. I don't want to hide him anymore. James had nodded in agreement. I want to remember him for real, not just the way Mommy wanted us to. That wall had become our altar, our reminder that love doesn't vanish with death, that a person's presence could still live in laughter and stories and photographs. Life wasn't perfect. There were still nights when James woke up crying from dreams about his father, and days when Emma grew quiet at school, withdrawing into herself. Grief doesn't move in a straight line. It ebbs and flows like the tide. But now, instead of being told to move on, they had permission to feel. To cry when they needed to laugh without guilt, to remember without fear. One rainy afternoon, James came inside soaked to the skin, holding a muddy baseball. Grandma, can you play catch with me? I know you're cooking, but it feels like the kind of day Daddy would have played anyway. I set the spoon down and grabbed a towel. Then we'll play in the rain. We ran outside together, Emma joining us, the three of us shrieking and laughing as the rain poured down. The neighbors probably thought we were crazy, but for that hour, it felt like Carlton was with us, his spirit in James's determination, his humor in Emma's laughter, his love in the way the three of us clung to one another under the storm. Later that night, while drying Emma's hair, she looked up at me with wide, thoughtful eyes. Grandma Nain, do you think Daddy can see us from heaven? I swallowed hard, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. Yes, sweetheart. I believe he sees every smile, every laugh, every time you're brave or kind. I believe he's so proud of you both." James, listening from the doorway, whispered, "Then I hope he saw us today." I hope he saw that we're okay. I hugged them both tightly. He did. And he's smiling. 6 months after Carlton's will had changed everything, I found myself standing in our backyard, watching Emma chase fireflies while James practiced pitching into a net Mr. Chin had surprised him with. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass, and the sound of the children's laughter carried into the evening sky. Cleo had tried, of course. She'd filed for an emergency hearing, insisting I was unfit, dragging my past homelessness into the spotlight. But Carlton's recordings, the meticulous notes he'd left, and the legal strength of his will had made the court's decision clear. The judge had granted me full custody. Cleo was given visitation, supervised, structured, and limited. She came every other weekend for a few hours. Sometimes she tried, sitting stiffly in the park with Emma and James, but the children never relaxed around her the way they did at home. They were polite but distant. They'd already learned what love felt like and what it didn't. I didn't hate Cleo, not anymore. Anger had burned hot in the beginning, but over time, I realized her coldness came from emptiness, from a life built on appearances instead of connection. I pitied her. But I would never again let that pity put Emma and James at risk. One evening, after the children were asleep, I sat in the living room with a mug of tea, looking at Carlton's picture on the mantel. His smile in that photo was as bright as the one I remembered from his childhood, when he tugged on my apron and asked for cookies. "Carlton," I whispered into the quiet, "I kept my promise. They're safe. They're loved. They laugh again." My voice broke. "I hope that's enough." And then, as if in answer, I heard Emma stir upstairs, murmuring in her sleep. I went to check on her and found James had crawled into her bed, the two of them curled up together, faces peaceful, safe. I pulled the blanket higher around their shoulders and kissed their foreheads. It was enough. More than enough. Carlton had given me a second chance, not just to be a grandmother, but to be the anchor his children needed. In saving them, he had saved me too. James was in the living room, sprawled on the floor with his homework spread across the coffee table, occasionally calling out math questions for me to help him solve. These were the sounds Carlton had wanted to protect when he made his secret arrangements. This was the life he'd envisioned for his children. Messy, loud, real, and full of unconditional love. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Through the front window, I could see a familiar figure standing on the porch, and my stomach tightened with old anxiety before I reminded myself that things were different now. Cleo stood on my doorstep holding a small gift bag, looking more uncertain than I'd ever seen her. The past 6 months hadn't been kind to her. Word around town was that she'd had to sell the showcase house. Apparently, Carlton's investments and insurance money had been specifically structured so that most of it went to his children's trust fund and to me, leaving her with only enough to start over, not enough to maintain her expensive lifestyle. "Hello, Nain," she said when I opened the door. "I was hoping I could see the children for a few minutes." "It's not your scheduled visitation day," I said calmly. Over the months, we'd established a routine. Supervised visits every other Saturday afternoon with the understanding that any changes needed to be discussed in advance. "I know. I brought Emma something for her birthday next week, and I thought maybe we could talk." I studied her face, looking for signs of the manipulation that had once come so naturally to her. Instead, I saw something I'd never seen before. Genuine humility. "The children are doing homework," I said, "but you can come in for a few minutes." She followed me into the living room where James looked up from his math problems with a polite but guarded expression. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, sweetheart. How's school? Going?" "Good." I made the honor roll again. His voice was matter-of-fact, neither seeking her approval nor rejecting her interest. "That's wonderful, James. Your father would be so proud." Something in her tone was different, softer, less performative. James seemed to notice it too because his posture relaxed slightly. "Emma," I called upstairs. Your mother is here. Emma appeared at the top of the stairs. And I watched Cleo's face change as she took in her daughter's appearance. Emma's hair was in a messy ponytail. She was wearing comfortable clothes that had definitely seen better days, and there was a streak of something that might have been paint or a marker on her cheek. She looked exactly like what she was, a 9-year-old girl who'd been allowed to be a child. "Hi, Mommy," Emma said, coming down the stairs, but stopping a few steps from the bottom. "I brought you an early birthday present," Cleo said, holding out the gift bag. Emma looked at me for permission before accepting it. Another sign of how much their relationship had changed. Inside the bag was a small silver locket, not expensive or flashy, just simple and pretty. "It has a picture of Daddy in it," Cleo said quietly. I thought. You might like to wear it sometimes." Emma opened the locket and smiled when she saw Carlton's photo inside. "Thank you, Mommy. It's really pretty. Would you like me to help you put it on?" Emma nodded, and for a few minutes, they worked together to fasten the chain around her neck. It was the most natural interaction I'd seen between them since before Carlton's death. After Emma went back upstairs and James returned to his homework, Cleo and I stood in the kitchen, the space thick with unspoken words. "They look happy," she said. "Finally. They're happy. They're allowed to be sad sometimes, too, which is equally important," she nodded. Slowly. "I wanted to apologize, Nain, for how I treated you after Carlton died. For the things I said." I leaned against the counter, studying her face. "What changed?" "Losing them," she said simply. "Losing the children made me realize that I'd been losing them already bit by trying to control everything instead of just loving them. And in seeing how much they've thrived with you made me understand that Carlton was right. He knew what they needed and he knew I wasn't ready to give it to them." It was the closest thing to accountability I'd ever heard from Cleo. And I found myself softening slightly despite myself. "They still need their mother," I said carefully. "Just not the mother you were trying to be. They need you to be real with them, to let them see your emotions, to admit when you make mistakes." I don't know how to do that. I was raised to keep everything together, to never let anyone see you struggle. Carlton struggled, too. Especially at the end. But he let the children see that it was okay to be scared, okay to be sad, okay to need help. That's what made him such a good father. Cleo was quiet for a long moment, then said something that surprised me. "You're a good grandmother, Nain. Better than I ever gave you credit for." "I love them. That's all I've ever done." "No, it's more than that. You listen to them. You see who they really are instead of trying to make them into who you think they should be." As she prepared to leave, Cleo paused at the front door. "Nain, would it be possible to schedule an extra visit next week for Emma's birthday? I'd like to take both children out for ice cream, just the three of us." I considered the request. 6 months ago, I would have been terrified to let the children go anywhere alone with Cleo. But the woman standing in front of me wasn't the same person who'd thrown away Carlton's belongings and dismissed my grief. She wasn't completely transformed. That would take years if it happened at all, but she was trying. "1 hour," I said. "And they call me when you pick them up and when you drop them off." "Thank you." After she left, James looked up from his homework. "Grandma Nain, do you think Mom is getting better?" It was such a perceptive question from a 10-year-old, and I realized that these children had been watching their mother just as carefully as I had. "I think she's trying to get better," I said honestly. "What do you think?" She seemed sadder, but nicer. James had been right. I thought the next morning as sunlight filtered through the curtains and the house stirred with the familiar creaks and whispers of a home waking up. Maybe Cleo was beginning to miss Carlton in the way the children and I did. Not as an abstract idea, not as a lost opportunity for wealth or status, but as the father and husband who had once anchored all of us with his steady love. The thought lingered as I brewed tea and listened to the quiet rhythm of our new life. It was remarkable how ordinary moments, spilled juice, mismatched socks, laughter that came at unexpected times, were the very things that stitched us back together after we'd been torn apart. That evening, after Emma and James were asleep, I sat on the back porch, steam curling from my teacup as the night sounds of the neighborhood filled the air. 6 months ago, I had been a woman cast out, sleeping in my car with nothing but heartbreak and shame for company. Tonight, I was a grandmother with legal guardianship of 2 thriving children, a comfortable roof over our heads, and enough security to never fear survival again. But money wasn't the miracle Carlton had given us. It was purpose. For the first time in years, I woke each morning knowing why I was needed, not as a convenience, not as an extra pair of hands, but as a heartbeat. I was the one who loved these children without condition, who would always place their hearts before appearances, who would always remind them that they were cherished. The next morning, Emma found me in the kitchen making pancakes, Carlton's recipe, with too much vanilla and a careless pinch of cinnamon. She climbed onto her usual stool, swinging her legs. "Grandma Nain," she said softly, her eyes bright, "I had a dream about Daddy last night." "Was it a good dream or a sad one?" I asked, setting a plate on the counter. "Good." She smiled faintly. "He was making pancakes just like you are. And he told me he was happy that you're taking care of us." My throat tightened as tears welled, but I didn't hide them. Emma had learned it was safe to see an adult cry, that tears weren't weakness, but love spilling over. "I'm happy to take care of you, too, sweetheart," I whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "It's the best job I've ever had." James shuffled in then, pajama-clad, hair sticking in wild directions. "Are those Dad's pancakes?" he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. "They are," I said with a smile. "With extra vanilla, just the way he made them." The 3 of us sat together, syrup dripping onto plates, orange juice spilling on the placemat, and laughter bubbling up in between bites. And in that messy, sticky moment, I realized Carlton's final fight hadn't been for money or even custody. It had been for this. For his children to grow up in a place where love came before perfection, where grief and joy lived side by side, and where being human was welcomed instead of silenced. Outside, the hum of lawnmowers and the calls of children playing floated through the air. Ordinary weekend sounds. And we were part of it now. Emma and James and I, we belonged again. That night, as I tucked Emma into bed, she studied me with her father's same serious brown eyes. "Grandma Nain, are you ever going to leave us again?" she whispered. "Never," I said firmly, smoothing her hair. "I'll be right here until you're grown up and don't need me anymore." She thought about that. "And then what will you do?" I smiled at the thought. "Then I'll be the grandmother who spoils her children and tells them all the embarrassing stories about how their parents used to eat dirt and put peanut butter in their hair." Emma burst into giggles. "James ate dirt constantly." James's voice floated from his room across the hall. I heard that. I laughed, closing her door gently. As I walked down the hall, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back was not the one who had left her home in shame half a year ago. She was stronger now, steadier, but also softer in the places that mattered. She knew her worth. She knew love was not a burden, but a legacy. In my room, I opened the drawer where I kept Carlton's last letter. I unfolded the worn paper and let his words wash over me again. "You are not a burden, Mom. You never were. You are the heart of this family, and I need you to remember that when things get difficult. Take care of my children the way you took care of me, with patience, with humor, with unconditional love. They will need you to be strong, but they will also need you to be human. Thank you for everything you sacrificed for me. Now it's my turn to take care of you." I pressed the letter to my chest before folding it carefully and placing it back. Tomorrow was Sunday, pancakes, errands, maybe a trip to the park if the weather held. Ordinary things. Simple things. The kind of life Carlton had treasured. The kind of life he'd made sure Emma and James could still have. For the first time in months, I fell asleep without a single worry about tomorrow. We were exactly where we belonged.